Those lines carved into ancient temple walls are not random decorations. They are complex mathematical blueprints deliberately etched in stone by civilizations with knowledge that rivals our own. This video reveals how our ancestors embedded advanced geometry, astronomy, and even early calculus into their most enduring structures, creating a permanent record of their genius. You will discover that everything you thought you knew about ancient history is incomplete, and by the end, you will see every ruin as a sophisticated textbook written in stone. How did builders thousands of years ago encode precise astronomical cycles into their temples without modern tools? Why would a civilization hide its most profound discoveries within the very walls of its cities? This journey uncovers a hidden intellectual legacy that reshapes our entire understanding of human progress. What does it truly mean to be an advanced civilization? Stone offered a permanence that papyrus and human memory could not guarantee. Throughout the ancient world, knowledge was the most fragile of treasures, constantly at risk from fire, decay, or the simple passage of time. A library could burn in a single night, and an oral tradition could vanish with one generation. But a temple, a pyramid, a city wall, these were built to last for ages. The architects of these structures faced a profound question. How do you ensure that your civilization's greatest intellectual achievements survive for thousands of years? Their ingenious solution was to weave that knowledge directly into the fabric of their architecture, turning entire buildings into durable libraries. This was not a simple act of recording, but a sophisticated art of encoding. Mathematical truths were hidden in plain sight, disguised as artistic flourishes, expressed through the precise proportions of a room, or locked into the alignment of a doorway with a distant star. The famous Pythagorean theorem, for instance, which defines the relationship between the sides of a right-angled triangle, appears in Babylonian clay tablets and ancient Indian texts long before the Greek philosopher Pythagoras ever lived. This was not a coincidence. It was a clear, deliberate act of preservation by multiple cultures who understood the universal and eternal nature of mathematical law. They were not just building shelters or places of worship. They were constructing a permanent legacy, ensuring that even if their language was forgotten and their cities fell to ruin, the core principles of geometry and astronomy would remain, waiting in the stones for a future generation to read them again. This fundamental desire to speak across the millennia transforms every ancient wall from a mere structure into a silent, patient teacher. Alexander Thom's meticulous surveys revealed a pattern so consistent it defied coincidence. He identified a unit of measure he called the megalithic yard, a length of approximately 2.72 feet that was used to lay out stone circles from the remote Scottish islands to the coast of France. This was not a rough estimate. The recurrence of this exact measurement across hundreds of sites, separated by vast distances and challenging terrain, points to a shared system of knowledge. It suggests that Neolithic surveyors possessed a standardized tool or a method of reproduction, so accurate that its echo can still be measured thousands of years later. But the mystery only deepens. Thom also discovered that these ancient builders were using Pythagorean triangles, constructed with whole number sides, to create perfect right angles for their monuments. This geometric principle, which we associate with the Greek mathematician Pythagoras, who lived millennia later, was already being applied with practical mastery. The stones themselves tell us that this knowledge was widespread and deeply understood. At sites like Stonehenge, the geometry becomes even more complex. The arrangement of stones is not merely circular. It forms intricate ellipses and egg-shaped patterns that require a sophisticated grasp of geometry to construct. Each standing stone is a point in a grand celestial calculation. The alignments of these monuments track the sun's solstices and the moon's extreme rising and setting points with staggering accuracy. This means the builders were not just astronomers, they were architects who could translate complex astronomical cycles into permanent stone diagrams. They were building a mathematical model of the heavens here on Earth. This reveals a unified intellectual tradition that connected Neolithic Europe, a shared language of mathematics and astronomy etched into the landscape. The precision of their work, achieved with stone tools and human strength, forces us to reconsider what we mean by prehistoric. These were not primitive people. They were precise thinkers, and their silent stone libraries hold the first chapters of a lost mathematical story. The Great Pyramid of Giza is a mathematical mountain. Constructed over 4,500 years ago, its sheer scale is overshadowed only by its intellectual ambition. The builders did not merely stack stones. They encoded fundamental truths of the universe into its very shape. Take the simple ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height. This calculation yields a number incredibly close to 2 pi, the fundamental constant that defines the relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter. This is not a coincidence. It means the pyramid's designers were working with a concept of advanced geometry that would not be formally defined for thousands of years. How did they achieve such precision with seemingly simple tools? The base of the pyramid forms a near-perfect square, its sides aligned to the 4 cardinal directions with an error margin of less than 1/15 of a degree. This required not just careful observation of the stars, but a deep, practical understanding of spherical geometry and measurement on a colossal scale. But the mathematical wonders do not stop there. The golden ratio, approximately 1.618, appears repeatedly in the pyramid's proportions. This irrational number, celebrated for its aesthetic harmony in nature and art, is embedded in the relationship between the pyramid's height and the base, and in the dimensions of its internal chambers. It is a number that seems to whisper of a deeper, more beautiful order in the cosmos, and the pyramid's architects heard it clearly. The passages inside the pyramid are not just corridors. They are precise sight lines permanently fixed on specific stars, turning the entire structure into a stone observatory. This combination of celestial alignment and geometric perfection forces a revolutionary conclusion. The pyramid was far more than a tomb. It was a 3-dimensional encyclopedia, a permanent repository for a civilization's most profound knowledge. The sloping sides and precisely angled passages are a form of early calculus, a way of capturing dynamic mathematical relationships in static stone. This silent, giant structure challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient technology and intellect. It stands as undeniable proof that our ancestors were not just builders, they were mathematicians and astronomers of the highest order. Across the ocean, the jungles of Central America hold a different kind of stone library. The Mayan civilization designed their temples not just as places of ritual, but as sophisticated astronomical machines. At the great city of Chichen Itza, the pyramid known as El Castillo stands as a testament to this genius. Its 4 stairways each have 91 steps, which, added to the shared platform at the top, gives a total of 365 steps, one for each day of the solar year. But the architects went far beyond simple counting. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, a breathtaking spectacle unfolds. The setting sun casts a series of triangular shadows along the northern staircase, creating the undulating body of a serpent that appears to slither down from the temple at the summit. This effect is not a happy accident. It is the result of incredibly precise calculations of solar angles and architectural proportions, a light show engineered in stone that repeats with celestial punctuality every single year. The Mayans were masters of time itself. Their mathematical system was extraordinarily advanced, operating on a base 20-numeral system that included a concept of zero, a revolutionary abstract idea that would not appear in Europe for centuries. Their long count calendar calculated the solar year with an accuracy that surpasses the Gregorian calendar we use today. This profound understanding of mathematics and astronomy was not confined to codices. It was literally built into their world. Temple doorways were often aligned with the extreme rising and setting points of Venus, a planet of great importance in their cosmology. The very proportions of their buildings reflect sacred ratios that connected the earthly realm to the cosmic order. A Mayan temple was more than a building. It was a stone embodiment of time, a three-dimensional calendar, and a permanent observatory. By encoding their knowledge into these immense structures, they ensured that even after their cities were reclaimed by the jungle, their intellectual achievements would endure, waiting patiently for a future age to decipher the equations written in their walls. In ancient Greece, the very stones of their temples whispered of a perfect mathematical order. The Parthenon stands as the ultimate expression of this philosophy, a structure where every proportion was meticulously calculated. Its design is saturated with the golden ratio, a number that creates a sense of balance and beauty found throughout the natural world. We see this divine proportion in the relationship between the building's width and height, and in the precise spacing of its majestic columns. This was far more than an aesthetic choice. It was a profound statement about the nature of reality itself. Greek philosophers like Pythagoras believed the universe was built upon mathematical laws, and that true beauty was the physical manifestation of this hidden harmony. A temple was not just a house for a god. It was a portal to understanding the cosmos, a place where human reason could touch the eternal. This philosophy was codified into the very rules of architecture. The three Greek orders, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, were not merely different styles. Each one was a strict set of mathematical formulas that governed the proportions of every single element. The height of a column, the width of a frieze, the depth of a step, all were determined by an unwavering ratio. This mathematical rigor even extended to correcting the imperfections of human vision. The stylobate, the platform on which the Parthenon stands, curves upward slightly in the center. The columns themselves lean inward and they bulge in the middle. These are not construction errors. They are brilliant optical refinements, complex geometric corrections designed to make the temple appear perfectly straight and majestic to the human eye. To achieve this, the architects had to anticipate how light and perspective would play tricks on a viewer, and then use geometry to build the solution directly into the marble. Walking through a Greek temple was meant to be an experience of walking through a mathematical truth, a physical embodiment of reason and order. This legacy of encoding mathematical beauty into stone would travel to Rome, be rediscovered 1,000 years later during the Renaissance, and shape the very foundations of Western art and architecture. While Greek temples embodied perfect ratios, the stonemasons of India were exploring a far more complex form of geometry. Their sacred structures unfold like a mathematical idea blooming in 3 dimensions. Between the 6th and 16th centuries, Indian temple architects created masterpieces that followed ancient texts known as the Shilpa Shastras. These were not simple building manuals. They were rigorous mathematical treatises that dictated every proportion down to the smallest detail, governing the relationship between every single element of a temple. The result was an architecture of profound complexity, where the entire structure often mimics the form of a sacred mountain, a cosmic axis reaching toward the heavens. But the true mathematical genius lies in a pattern that repeats throughout these temples. Look closely at a towering spire like the one at the Kandariya Mahadeva temple, and you will see something remarkable. The main central tower is not a single, smooth shape. It is surrounded by a cascade of smaller, nearly identical towers, each one a perfect echo of the whole. These smaller forms cluster around the central peak, and they themselves are often adorned with even tinier versions of the same shape. This is a recursive pattern, a design where the same form repeats itself at different scales. It is a visual rhythm that creates immense complexity from a simple, repeating rule. This is the essence of fractal geometry, a branch of mathematics formally developed in the 20th century. These ancient architects had an intuitive grasp of a concept that would take the modern world complex computer models to fully describe. They saw that this recursive pattern was the architecture of nature itself, found in the branching of trees, the shape of mountain ranges, and the structure of a snowflake. By building it into their temples, they were encoding a fundamental truth about the cosmos. The entire layout of these temples often forms a mandala, a geometric diagram of the universe. Every square, every circle, and every intersection point is governed by precise mathematical relationships, turning the floor plan into a cosmic map. This was not mathematics for its own sake. It was a spiritual endeavor. The architects believed the universe was built on mathematical laws, and by constructing a temple that perfectly embodied those laws, they were creating a bridge between the human and the divine. The stone itself became a meditation on infinity, a frozen song of repeating patterns that continues to whisper its secrets to those who know how to look. While Greek temples explored divine ratios and Indian spires reached for fractal infinity, another civilization was mastering geometry's final frontier, the art of infinite repetition. In the grand tradition of encoding knowledge in architecture, Islamic artists and architects from the 8th century onward transformed entire buildings into breathtaking visual theorems. With religious traditions often discouraging figurative art in sacred spaces, creators turned to the pure language of mathematics for expression. They did not see this as a limitation, but as a gateway to a higher form of beauty. The intricate mosaics and lattices that adorn mosques and palaces are far more than decoration. They are complex mathematical principles made visible, a silent symphony of shape and symmetry. These artists achieved something that would not be formally understood in the West for centuries. They discovered and mastered all 17 of the possible wallpaper groups. This is the complete mathematical classification for every single way a two-dimensional pattern can repeat across a flat surface without any gaps or overlaps. It is the entire periodic table for pattern itself, and the proof of this mastery is etched in stone and tile for anyone to see. The Alhambra Palace in Spain stands as the ultimate textbook of this knowledge. Its walls and courtyards contain working examples of nearly every one of these 17 symmetrical arrangements. Walking through its halls is like walking through a living museum of advanced mathematical group theory, constructed centuries before the theory even had a name. The builders were not just applying pretty designs, they were demonstrating a comprehensive, almost encyclopedic, understanding of geometric possibility. Creating these patterns required immense skill. It began with a circle, meticulously divided into equal parts using only a compass and a straight edge. From this simple starting point, a universe of complex, interlocking stars, polygons, and arabesques would unfold. Each shape fits perfectly with its neighbors, a puzzle with no beginning and no end, designed to draw the eye toward the infinite. This was the philosophical heart of the work. The endless repetition of a single, perfect cell was a conscious representation of the divine unity underlying all creation, a universe born from a single source and governed by unbreakable laws. This mathematical language became a universal constant across the vast Islamic world, from the courts of Spain to the monuments of India. The core principles of symmetry and tessellation remained consistent, a shared intellectual framework that transcended local cultures and styles. This tradition represents one of the most explicit fusions of art and mathematics ever achieved. It created a visual language of calculus and symmetry that anyone could appreciate, a democratic expression of profound genius that required no formal training to feel, only an open eye and a wondering mind. Far from the intricate tessellations of Islamic art, an entirely different mathematical philosophy was shaping entire cities in ancient China. Here, geometry was not just about patterns or ratios, but about creating a perfect earthly mirror of the heavens. From the Zhou dynasty over 2,000 years ago, Chinese city planners designed their capitals as cosmic diagrams, built to a divine scale. The ideal city was a perfect square, its walls aligned with the four cardinal directions. At its absolute center sat the imperial palace, a symbolic representation of the pole star, the unmoving axis around which the entire celestial sphere was believed to revolve. This was not a vague metaphor. It was a precise geometric model of the universe constructed in wood and stone, a physical manifestation of a profound mathematical worldview. The Forbidden City in Beijing stands as the ultimate expression of this cosmic mathematics. Its vast rectangular enclosure, its gates perfectly positioned north, south, east, and west, and its perfectly symmetrical arrangement of halls and courtyards all follow a rigid geometric order. Every building, every pathway exists in a proportional relationship with the whole. This incredible precision was made possible by a modular system of construction. Architects worked with standard units like the kai, a standardized timber module. This modular approach functioned like a set of mathematical building blocks, allowing for immense flexibility while guaranteeing that every single component, from the grandest hall to the most humble beam, adhered to a unified and harmonious set of proportions. This was not guesswork, it was codified science. The Yingzhou Fashi, a 12th century architectural manual, reads more like a mathematical textbook than a simple builder's guide. It contains detailed formulas for everything, from the exact dimensions of structural brackets to the complex curvature of a roof. These formulas ensured structural integrity, but they did much more. They translated abstract mathematical principles into tangible, beautiful form. This deep integration of calculation and craft was guided by the principles of Feng Shui. Far from mere superstition, Feng Shui was a sophisticated system of spatial mathematics. It involved complex calculations to determine the most harmonious orientations, proportions, and relationships between buildings and the natural landscape. The goal was to align human structures with the invisible energetic currents of the Earth itself. What emerges is a picture of a civilization that saw no separation between the numbers on a page, the stars in the sky, and the walls of a city. Mathematics was the connective tissue that bound the cosmic to the human, the abstract to the practical. A walk through a traditional Chinese city was a walk through a living equation, where every right angle and symmetrical axis was a silent testament to a belief in a universe governed by mathematical harmony. This philosophy permeated everything, from the grandest urban plan down to the decorative details on a single roof tile, creating an architecture that was, in its very essence, a comprehensive model of a mathematically ordered cosmos. The Romans built an empire that physically reshaped the world, and they did it with math you could walk on. While they left behind fewer theoretical texts than the Greeks, their entire civilization stands as a monumental testament to practical mathematics in action. Their genius was not in exploring abstract numbers, but in applying geometry and calculation to solve problems of staggering scale. Consider the humble yet revolutionary Roman arch. That perfect semicircular form is a masterclass in applied geometry. Its shape is derived from a circle, and its stability comes from a deep, practical understanding of how to distribute immense weight and force downward and outward, channeling it safely into the supporting piers. This single mathematical concept, repeated thousands of times, allowed them to build aqueducts that marched across valleys and bridges that have carried traffic for 2,000 years. But their mathematical ambition reached its zenith in the Pantheon. Its dome is not just a roof, it is a perfect hemisphere of concrete, a geometric ideal made real on an unprecedented scale. The oculus at its center, the open eye to the sky, is precisely centered, maintaining the integrity of the spherical form. The thickness of the dome and the step rings built into its structure are calculated to reduce weight without sacrificing strength, a complex exercise in volumetric calculation and structural mechanics that remains awe-inspiring. This was not guesswork, it was codified knowledge. The architect Vitruvius, in his 1st century BCE work on architecture, laid out the mathematical education required of a master builder. He detailed how geometry was essential for site planning and perspective, how arithmetic was needed for budgeting and measurements, and how even basic astronomy informed the orientation of buildings. This practical knowledge was systematized and passed down, creating a repeatable process for empire building. Roman urban planning turned mathematics into a way of life. Their cities were laid out on a precise grid, the Cardo and Decumanus crossing at right angles to create orderly blocks. Standardized dimensions for everything from pipes to bricks ensured efficiency and interchangeability across millions of square miles. Their water systems, fed by gravity through aqueducts with meticulously calculated slopes, required an advanced understanding of elevation and flow rates to function. Even their revolutionary concrete was a mathematical achievement, its legendary durability arising from a precise formula, a calculated mixture of lime, volcanic ash, and aggregate that produced a predictable chemical reaction, creating a synthetic stone. The Roman approach proves that mathematics does not need to be theoretical to be profound. Their legacy is written in the enduring stone of roads, amphitheaters, and temples that still define landscapes today. They used math not as a philosophical exercise, but as the most powerful tool for civilization itself, a tool for creating a world meant to last forever. This architectural leap required a new kind of mathematics, one that could bridge the earthly and the heavenly. The challenge was immense: to place a vast circular dome atop a solid square base. The solution was a geometric marvel known as the pendentive. These are the curved, triangular segments of masonry that fill in the upper corners of the square room. They act as a graceful mathematical transition, a smooth funnel that channels the immense, continuous load of the circular dome down onto 4 sturdy pillars at the corners. To design this, the architects had to master spherical geometry. They were no longer just working with flat planes and right angles. They were calculating complex curves in 3 dimensions, determining the precise curvature of the pendentives so they would merge perfectly with the dome's own hemisphere. This was structural mathematics of breathtaking sophistication, performed centuries before the formal calculus that would later describe such forms. The result inside the Hagia Sophia is a space that feels miraculously unmoored. The dome, nearly 180 feet high, appears to hover on a ring of light from its 40 windows, a floating canopy of stone. This was not just an engineering triumph. It was a theological statement built with mathematical certainty. The square floor represented the solid, four-cornered earth, while the perfect sphere of the dome above symbolized the heavens. The entire church became a cosmic model, a mathematical diagram of the universe where worshippers stood literally at the intersection of the earthly and the divine. This Byzantine fusion of calculation and cosmology created an architectural language that would echo for 1,000 years. Its principles traveled east, informing the great domes of Islamic mosques, and west, inspiring the Renaissance architects who sought to recapture that same sublime grandeur. The enduring silence of these ancient churches is deceptive. They are not quiet at all. They are a perpetual lecture delivered in the language of stone and light on the spherical geometry that holds heaven and earth together. That same mathematical ambition to reach for the heavens found a new, breathtaking expression in the Gothic cathedrals of medieval Europe. Emerging in the 12th century, these stone skeletons represent a revolution in structural mathematics, where geometry became the invisible force holding the entire building together. The goal was no longer just to build strong, but to build with an impossible lightness, to create walls of colored light and vaults that seemed to float. This was only possible through a profound understanding of how to channel force and weight. The key innovation was the rib vault, a web of intersecting stone arches that form a delicate skeleton across the ceiling. Each of these ribs is a perfectly calculated arch, and the points where they meet had to be carved with geometric precision. This network acted like a stone spiderweb, distributing the immense weight of the roof down to specific, powerful columns, freeing the walls from their load-bearing duty. This is what allowed those walls to be replaced with the vast, narrative-stained glass windows that fill the interiors with a divine glow. But the true mathematical marvel is the flying buttress. These graceful, arched stone arms that leap from the outside walls to distant piers are not decorative flourishes. They are the structural genius of Gothic engineering made visible. They act as permanent mathematical solutions, braced against the outward thrust of the vaults, locking the entire delicate system into a perfect balance of forces. To design this, the master masons relied on two powerful geometric techniques. The ad quadratum method used the square and its diagonal to generate all the proportions of the building, from the width of the nave to the height of the arches. The ad triangulum method used the perfect ratios of equilateral triangles to determine the steep pitch of the roofs and the harmonious relationships between different parts of the structure. This was not abstract theory. It was a hands-on, practical geometry that guided the stonemasons as they carved each block. Complex, full-scale geometric diagrams were drawn directly onto the tracing house floor, the templates for every uniquely shaped stone. A cathedral was, in essence, a three-dimensional puzzle composed of thousands of individually calculated pieces, each one a testament to applied mathematics. The result was an architecture that truly transcended its materials. Walking into Chartres or Cologne Cathedral is an experience of calculated awe. The sheer verticality, the sense that the stone is weightless and the ceiling is infinitely high, is an emotional effect achieved through unerring mathematical logic. These spaces do not feel heavy because the forces are not hidden, they are elegantly resolved. The Gothic tradition proves that mathematical innovation is the key to architectural magic, transforming stone and glass into a vision of the sublime that has lost none of its power to inspire wonder after 800 years. High in the Andes, the stones themselves seem to defy gravity. The Inca civilization mastered a form of architectural magic that was, in fact, a brilliant application of modular mathematics. At sites like Sacsayhuaman, you will find walls built from massive, irregularly shaped blocks of stone, some weighing over 100 tons. These are not simple rectangles. They are complex polygonal shapes with numerous sides and angles, yet they fit together with such astonishing precision that the seams between them are virtually invisible. You cannot slide a piece of paper or even the blade of a knife between these stones. This technique, known as polygonal masonry, is a three-dimensional puzzle of epic scale. Each block was uniquely shaped to interlock perfectly with all of its neighbors above, below, and to the sides. This was not a random process. It required an intuitive yet highly advanced understanding of geometry. The builders had to mentally calculate the complex spatial relationships between dozens of irregular forms, custom carving each one to create a seamless, monolithic wall. How did they achieve this without iron tools, without mortar, and without a written system of numbers? They developed a system of modular mathematics that was physical, not theoretical. They understood stone as a material, its grain and its strengths, and they used that knowledge to create structures that moved with the earth. While European cathedrals relied on rigid symmetry to stand, the Incas built for flexibility. In an earthquake-prone landscape, a rigid wall will crack and collapse, but an Inca wall with its interlocking blocks actually trembles and then settles back into place, the stones shifting as a unified, flexible whole. This seismic resilience is engineering genius encoded directly into the construction method itself. The mathematics are not drawn on a wall, they are the wall. The city of Machu Picchu takes this principle and expands it to an urban scale. Its terraces are precise mathematical exercises in civil engineering, calculated to prevent erosion and maximize agricultural land on steep slopes. The water channels that fed the city demonstrate a masterful understanding of hydraulics and gravity flow, requiring precise calculations of slope and volume. Even the layout of the city incorporates sacred geometries and alignments with solstice sunrises and important mountain peaks, weaving their cosmological beliefs into the very fabric of the plan. The Inca approach shows us that mathematical genius is not always about perfect circles and golden ratios. Sometimes it is about solving a practical problem with such profound elegance that the solution becomes a form of art. Their legacy is a different kind of stone library, one where the knowledge is not in the pattern on the surface, but in the very way each stone was chosen, shaped, and set into place, creating a silent, enduring testament to a mathematics of resilience. Deep within the Cambodian jungle, a stone model of the universe awaits the dawn. The temples of Angkor, constructed across 6 centuries, are not merely monuments to gods, but to a civilization's profound command of celestial mathematics. The most breathtaking example occurs each year at Angkor Wat. On the spring equinox, the sun performs a perfect alignment, rising in flawless precision directly over the temple's central tower. This is no fortunate accident. It is the result of meticulous calculation, a permanent appointment with the cosmos etched in sandstone. The entire complex is a representation of the Hindu universe. Its 5 central towers symbolize the peaks of Mount Meru, the mythical axis of the world, while the surrounding walls and moat represent the distant mountain ranges and the cosmic ocean. This symbolic map is also a mathematical one. The distances between key structures within the temple correspond to the cycles of planets, and the overall layout mirrors specific star patterns, turning the ground beneath your feet into a scaled-down chart of the heavens. This astronomical encoding extends far beyond Angkor Wat itself. Recent LiDAR technology has stripped away the jungle canopy to reveal the truth. The temple was the spiritual heart of a vast, geometrically planned metropolis. Canals, roads, and residential districts were laid out in a precise grid, a sprawling exercise in urban mathematics that seamlessly integrated sophisticated hydraulic engineering with cosmic symbolism. Water, the source of life for the empire's agriculture, was managed through a network of reservoirs and channels whose construction required advanced understanding of volume, flow, and elevation. Even the practical was bound to the celestial. At the Bayon Temple, the mystery deepens. Its famous, serene stone faces gaze out from every direction, but they are more than artistic wonders. They are fixed points in a grand astronomical design. The temple's unique architecture incorporates alignments that track the movements of the sun and moon throughout the year. Specific corridors and doorways are positioned to capture slivers of light on significant dates, marking the passage of time with a silent, stone clock precision. This was mathematics in service of life itself. The encoded knowledge did not exist in a vacuum. It dictated the timing of religious ceremonies and, most critically, guided the agricultural cycles that sustained the entire kingdom. The builders achieved a complete fusion of disciplines. Their mathematics was the connective tissue that bound the practical need for water and food to a spiritual belief in a cosmic order. In doing so, they created an architecture that did not just point to the heavens, but one that literally brought the cosmos down to earth, building a universe in stone that still breathes with the rhythms of the sun and stars. Long before the pyramids rose from the desert, the first mathematical mountains were being erected on the plains of Mesopotamia. The Ziggurats, those massive stepped pyramids dating back over 6,000 years, were more than just temples. They were the original three-dimensional spreadsheets, built from the very numbers that their priests and scribes were inventing. The entire structure of these monuments was governed by the base 60 numeral system, a revolutionary Sumerian concept that still dictates our lives today through every 60-second minute and 360-degree circle. This was not a coincidence. The ziggurat was a physical manifestation of their mathematical universe. Its design was a deliberate act of encoding, with each of the 7 tiers representing one of the 7 celestial bodies they observed moving across the heavens. But the true genius lies in the proportions. The relationship between the height of one level and the width of the next was not arbitrary. It followed precise ratios that we now recognize from the thousands of clay tablets uncovered by archaeologists. These tablets reveal a staggering truth. Mesopotamian mathematicians were working with Pythagorean triples, solving complex quadratic equations, and even exploring the fundamental principles of calculus, all centuries before the Greeks gave these concepts their famous names. How do you translate such abstract knowledge into a mountain of mud brick? The construction of a ziggurat required a masterful synthesis of geometry and practical engineering. Builders had to maintain perfect structural integrity while simultaneously adhering to these sacred, symbolic proportions. The famed Etemenanke ziggurat in Babylon, often identified as the legendary Tower of Babel, was described in cuneiform texts with dimensions that were not random. Its measurements were a direct expression of mathematical constants that held deep cosmological significance for the Babylonians, numbers they believed were woven into the fabric of creation itself. This was the birthplace of a powerful feedback loop. Architectural ambition drove mathematical discovery, and new mathematical insights, in turn, enabled ever more ambitious architecture. The ziggurat was both the product of this cycle and its ultimate symbol. It stands as the foundational chapter in humanity's long tradition of hiding its most profound intellectual work in plain sight, a tradition of encoding mathematics in architecture that would travel across continents and millennia, starting with these first, magnificent steps toward the sky. Across the Appalachian Mountains, a different kind of mathematical library lies not in stone, but in the soil itself. The mound-building cultures of North America transformed the very earth into colossal geometric diagrams, creating forms so vast their true shape can only be comprehended from the air. At places like Cahokia, across the Mississippi River from modern-day St. Louis, the landscape was meticulously engineered. Its central monk's mound rises in 4 terraced levels, a massive earthen pyramid that anchors a complex of precisely oriented plazas and smaller mounds. The entire city plan is a sophisticated arrangement of circles, squares, and alignments, a geometric metropolis constructed entirely from earth. The most breathtaking example is the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio. This winding earthwork, over 1,348 feet long, is not a random squiggle. Its coils form a series of perfectly calculated ovals, and the serpent's head aligns with the summer solstice sunset, while its body points to other significant celestial events. This is a snake engineered from mathematics and astronomy, a permanent constellation drawn on the ground. How did these cultures achieve such precision over hundreds of feet without a written number system or metal tools? They possessed a deep, practical geometry. Surveys reveal that many earthworks incorporate perfect Pythagorean triangles and precise circles, laid out with an accuracy that suggests a shared, standardized unit of measure, a kind of Native American megalithic yard. Building these forms required more than just digging. It demanded advanced planning. The architects had to calculate volumes of earth, coordinate the labor of entire communities, and translate a small-scale design onto a gigantic, living canvas, all while maintaining perfect geometric proportions across rolling hills and forests. The scale itself was part of the mathematical statement. Some earthworks were so large that their builders could never see the full form they were creating. They had to work on faith, guided by mathematical rules and celestial markers, trusting that the alignment of a distant post with a specific star would result in a perfect square or a sacred ratio. Recent research suggests these sites functioned as massive calendrical computers. The geometric relationships between mounds, or the alignment of an earthwork's axis, could track the 18.6-year lunar cycle or mark the solstices with unwavering accuracy. This demonstrates that mathematical encoding is not limited to durable stone. Here, Earth itself became the medium for permanent intellectual expression. These landscapes challenge every assumption about who discovers mathematical truths. They stand as a powerful testament to a uniquely American genius, a tradition of mathematical landscaping that turned the continent itself into a sacred textbook of geometry and time. Even paradise had its own precise mathematical formula. In the arid landscapes of ancient Persia, a different kind of blueprint flourished, one that used living things instead of stone. The Persian garden, a refuge of cool shade and flowing water, was a masterpiece of quadripartite mathematics, a deliberate arrangement of space that blended geometry, hydraulics, and cosmic order into a single harmonious experience. The foundational design was the Chahar Bog, meaning 4 gardens. This layout divided a perfect square into 4 equal quadrants using 2 intersecting water channels. These channels were far more than decorative. They represented the 4 sacred rivers of paradise described in Zoroastrian and later Islamic tradition, a symbolic map of the cosmos made real. This rigid 4-part structure was a mathematical framework of perfect symmetry and balance, creating a sense of orderly beauty that was both deeply spiritual and intensely practical. Every element within this geometric grid was placed according to precise proportional relationships. The length of a pathway, the width of a channel, the height of a cypress tree, all existed in a calculated ratio to one another. The placement of pavilions and flower beds followed geometric patterns, often based on the division of squares and the repetition of specific angles, creating a visual rhythm that pleased the eye and calmed the mind. This was not random landscaping, it was applied geometry on a grand scale, a living equation where every variable was a plant, a path, or a pool of water. The true genius of these gardens flowed through their veins, the water itself. In a desert climate, managing this precious resource was a matter of survival, and it required advanced hydraulic mathematics. The channels were not merely dug, they were engineered with meticulously calculated slopes to ensure a consistent, gentle flow. Builders demonstrated an early understanding of pressure and volume, designing fountains that could play without powerful pumps, using only gravity and the clever arrangement of pipes. The mathematics of flow ensured that every part of the garden received its share of life-giving water, turning a symbolic design into a functioning ecosystem. This mathematical order even extended to the heavens. Many Persian gardens were aligned with celestial events. A central axis might point toward the sunrise on the spring equinox, or a specific pavilion could be positioned to capture the light of a significant star. The garden was a clock and a calendar, its design marking the passage of time and the turning of the seasons. This integration of astronomy with geometry and hydraulics is what makes the Persian garden such a profound mathematical achievement. It wasn't just one discipline, it was the synthesis of many, a unified system where algebra calculated water distribution, geometry shaped the paths, and astronomy set the orientation. This powerful concept of a mathematically perfect paradise traveled along ancient trade routes, influencing the courtyards of Spain's Alhambra and the Mughal gardens of India, from Shalimar to the Taj Mahal. In this tradition, we see that mathematical encoding was not confined to the inert and the monumental. It could be breathed in the scent of a rose, heard in the trickle of a fountain, and felt in the cool shade of a symmetrical orchard. The Persian garden represents the ultimate fusion of calculation and creation, proving that our ancestors used mathematics not only to build their world, but to cultivate a living, breathing vision of heaven on earth. The stone walls of Great Zimbabwe curve with a geometric grace that defies their immense age. Constructed between the 11th and 15th centuries, this city represents an independent African tradition of mathematical architecture. Its builders created towering structures without a single drop of mortar, relying instead on the perfect fit of precisely shaped stones. The walls of the great enclosure rise and fall in elegant, undulating curves, a feat that required a sophisticated understanding of circular geometry and a masterful control of proportion. Every opening, every gateway was carefully calculated not just for passage, but for optimal structural strength, distributing the massive weight of the granite walls with unerring accuracy. This was not random piling, it was a deliberate application of structural mathematics, with walls intentionally tapered from bottom to top to create perfect stability that has withstood centuries of weather and time. The city itself was a mathematical diagram of social order. Its layout followed a clear hierarchical pattern, with distinct areas for royal residence, ritual practice, and public life, all organized according to principles of spatial mathematics. Archaeologists have found evidence of a standardized unit of measurement used consistently across the entire complex, a clear sign of a developed and codified system of mathematical practice shared by the master builders. This knowledge was not confined to the earth. Key walls and openings within the city are aligned with significant solar and lunar events, connecting the urban plan to the agricultural and ritual calendar that governed society. The mathematical thinking even extended to the decorative. Artisans incorporated intricate patterns into soapstone carvings and other elements, designs that repeat and scale in a fractal-like manner, echoing the same recursive principles seen in distant Indian temples. This independent flowering of mathematical genius in southern Africa fundamentally challenges any simple narrative of intellectual progress. It proves that advanced mathematical thinking, with its own unique solutions and expressions, emerged simultaneously across human civilizations. Great Zimbabwe and other African stone cities are not outliers. They are vital chapters in the same global story, revealing a universal human drive to encode our deepest understanding of the world into the most permanent materials we can shape. Their silent, enduring walls are a powerful testament to a forgotten mathematical legacy, waiting patiently for its rightful place in history. Behind these cloistered walls, a different kind of mathematical order was taking shape. Medieval monasteries functioned as meticulously planned communities where every stone and pathway was governed by a divine sense of geometry. The classic Benedictine plan was not merely an arrangement of buildings, it was a mathematical diagram for a complete way of life. At places like the Great Abbey of Cluny in France, the entire complex was laid out using a modular system, where the dimensions of the church, the cloister, and the workshops all related to each other through precise, harmonious ratios. This was architecture as a form of prayer, where proportion itself was thought to bring one closer to God. The cloister garden, often a perfect square, was the tranquil heart of this mathematical world. Its geometric paving patterns and symmetrically divided planting beds were not just decorative. They were a symbolic representation of the ordered cosmos, a miniature universe where every herb and pathway had its rightful place according to a celestial blueprint. This mathematical rigor extended to the Abbey Church, where the relationship between its length, width, and height was calculated using sacred ratios believed to reflect the harmony of creation. Building such a self-contained world required immense practical mathematics. Monks surveyed the land with astonishing accuracy, calculated the volumes of stone and timber needed for vast construction projects, and engineered water systems to serve the community's needs. The monastery was a living machine, and mathematics was the invisible force that made it work, optimizing the flow of people and goods between the spaces for worship, scholarship, farming, and hospitality. Within their scriptoriums, these same monks meticulously copied and preserved ancient mathematical texts from Greece and Rome, creating a vital feedback loop. The theoretical knowledge in the manuscripts informed the practical geometry of the building sites, and the challenges of construction, in turn, deepened their understanding of the texts. This unique fusion of classical learning and Christian theology created environments that were both intellectually rigorous and spiritually profound. The monastery was more than a collection of buildings. It was a physical manifestation of a belief that the universe itself was built on mathematical laws, and that by creating order on earth, one could mirror the perfect order of heaven. In Japan, the mathematics of stability was carved directly into wooden joints, while other civilizations expressed their genius in stone geometry and cosmic alignments. Japanese temple builders from the 7th century onward encoded their most profound calculations where no one would ever see them, inside the intricate connections between wooden beams. This was mathematics as a hidden skeleton, a framework of pure logic that gave their structures both incredible resilience and serene beauty. The entire system was built upon a modular unit called the ken, a standard measurement of approximately 1.82 meters that governed every dimension of a building. From the space between pillars to the height of a ceiling, every element existed in a precise proportional relationship with this module. This created an invisible mathematical harmony that the eye perceives as perfect balance, even if the underlying equations remain unseen. But the true mathematical marvel lies in the joinery itself. Japanese craftsmen developed hundreds of different joint types, each a complex three-dimensional puzzle. These were not simple notches. They were interlocking geometries with angled faces and tapered wings that locked together under pressure, creating connections far stronger than any nail. To design these joints required an intuitive mastery of solid geometry. visualizing how multiple planes could intersect within a single block of wood to create a union that would actually tighten when shaken. This knowledge was what allowed wooden pagodas 5 stories tall to stand for over 1,000 years in a land racked by earthquakes. The pagoda's central pillar, suspended like a massive pendulum, and the complex joinery of its brackets act as a sophisticated shock absorber, allowing the structure to sway and dissipate energy without collapsing. Every curved roof eave you see on a classic temple is itself a product of intense calculation. Achieving that graceful upward sweep required carpenters to solve complex curvature problems, determining the exact angles for hundreds of individually cut rafters so they would merge into a single flowing line. This was architectural calculus performed with hand tools, guided by geometric rules passed down through generations of master builders. The layout of the entire temple complex followed mathematical principles imported from Chinese cosmology, but refined through a uniquely Japanese lens of aesthetic subtlety. Here, the mathematics was not displayed for admiration. It was concealed within the very logic of construction, a deep understanding that true strength comes not from rigid resistance, but from flexible, intelligent design. This tradition represents a different philosophy of mathematical encoding altogether, where the greatest wisdom is not written on the walls, but hidden in the joints that hold everything together. Across the world's largest ocean, a different kind of blueprint guided voyages of impossible distance. The Polynesian explorers who settled the Pacific were mathematical geniuses of the open sea, and their knowledge was etched not only in memory but into the very temples on shore. These navigators crossed thousands of miles of trackless water by reading the stars, waves, and winds, a living system of calculus that they sometimes made permanent in stone. On the islands of Hawaii, the heiau massive stone platforms were more than places of worship. They were carefully oriented celestial markers. The walls of a heiau might align precisely with the rising point of the star Arcturus, known to Hawaiians as Hokulea, or its platform could be positioned to catch the solstice sunrise along a specific edge. This turned the entire structure into a stable, unchanging reference point, a fixed landmark confirming the cosmic knowledge that guided their canoes. The mathematical brilliance lies in how this was achieved without a written number system. Complex navigational formulas, star paths, and the subtle mathematics of wave interference patterns were encoded into chants, rituals, and the precise layouts of these sacred sites. The proportions of a heiau often followed the Kalena system of measurement, based on the human body, yet these familiar units were used to create precise geometric relationships that mirrored their understanding of the cosmos. Some structures functioned as sophisticated calendars. A single upright stone could cast a shadow that, at the summer solstice, touched a specific petroglyph or another stone, marking the turning of the year with silent, solar accuracy. The construction itself was a feat of practical geometry. Building these massive platforms with water-worn stones required surveying level foundations on uneven ground and calculating the angles and friction of each stone to create walls that have withstood hurricanes and centuries. This was mathematics born from absolute necessity. A mistake in a star chart could mean a canoe was lost forever. An error in reading the ocean swells meant never finding land. Their mathematical development was driven by the most urgent needs of survival navigation, agriculture timed by the stars, and communicating with the gods who governed the natural world. Yet from this practical pressure emerged an abstract and sophisticated understanding of the universe. The Polynesian example profoundly expands our definition of mathematical discovery. It shows us that isolation was not a barrier but a catalyst for unique intellectual traditions. Here, in the vastness of the Pacific, a civilization developed its own complete system for encoding the laws of nature, proving once again that the human drive to quantify and understand the cosmos is as universal as the ocean itself. That Renaissance revival was born not from discovery, but from a deliberate act of intellectual recovery. In the 15th century, a goldsmith and clockmaker named Filippo Brunelleschi stood before the unfinished Florence Cathedral, confronting a void that had defied builders for decades. The challenge was a dome wider than the Pantheon's, soaring over 150 feet above the cathedral floor. The conventional method of construction, using a massive wooden support scaffold called centering, was impossible. The required timber simply did not exist. Brunelleschi's solution was pure structural mathematics. He designed a double-shelled dome, a revolutionary concept where an inner and outer shell supported each other, locked together by a system of stone chains and horizontal sandstone rings. These rings acted like barrels' hoops, containing the immense outward thrust of the dome. He even invented a novel herringbone brick-laying pattern, a geometric arrangement that allowed the bricks to support themselves as they curved inward, each course locking the one below it into place. This was not guesswork. It was the application of a new, practical geometry to a problem that had seemed insurmountable. Brunelleschi had spent years in Rome measuring the ruins of ancient structures, reverse engineering the mathematical principles that allowed them to stand. He was not just copying forms, he was decoding a lost language of calculation. His success proved that the most beautiful forms were born from the most rigorous mathematics. This mathematical spirit was then codified into law by the architect Leon Battista Alberti. In his treatise On the Art of Building, he argued that beauty was an objective mathematical reality. A building should be designed like a perfect musical chord, its proportions based on the same simple whole number ratios that create harmonic consonants in music. For Alberti, a room's length, width, and height should relate to each other like the notes in a chord, 2-to-1, 3-to-2, creating a space that felt inherently right and harmonious to the human soul. This was the encoding of cosmic order into civic architecture, a belief that mathematical truth was the foundation of both beauty and virtue. This philosophy reached its ultimate expression in the villas of Andrea Palladio. His buildings are textbooks of applied ratios. The Villa Rotonda is a perfect square under a perfect dome, with 4 identical porticos whose columns, steps, and pediments all relate through an unerring system of proportions. He used these ratios to design everything from the grand facade down to the dimensions of a single window. Walking through a Palladian villa is an experience of mathematical serenity, where every visual relationship has been calculated to create a sense of calm and perfect balance. But the Renaissance's greatest mathematical gift to architecture was a new way of seeing. Brunelleschi's other great innovation was the formalization of linear perspective, the geometric rules for creating the illusion of depth on a flat surface. This was not just for painters. Architects began to design their buildings with perspective views in mind, calculating how a structure would appear to a person approaching from a specific point. The building itself became a demonstration of spatial geometry, its lines receding to a calculated vanishing point, pulling the viewer into a mathematically defined space. This period represents a profound fusion of art and science, where the humanist belief in human reason found its ultimate expression in stone and mortar. The Renaissance did not just build beautiful buildings, it built a world where beauty was defined by the eternal and universal language of mathematics. The straight lines of the Renaissance gave way to a mathematics of motion. In the Baroque era of the 17th and early 18th centuries, architects began to treat stone as if it were a fluid medium, creating buildings that seemed to breathe and undulate. This was not a rejection of mathematics, but a profound evolution of it, moving beyond static circles and squares to embrace complex curves and dynamic transformations. Architects like Francesco Borromini and Guarino Guarini employed a new, more experimental form of geometry to achieve forms that were previously unimaginable. They were not just building structures, they were capturing the very essence of movement and emotion in limestone and marble. Consider Borromini's tiny church of San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane in Rome. Its facade is a masterclass in calculated motion. The wall does not stand flat and passive. It swells outward and recedes inward in a gentle, rhythmic wave. This rippling effect is not an artistic whim. It is the product of sophisticated geometric calculations based on alternating convex and concave curves. Step inside and you find an oval dome, a shape far more complex to engineer than a perfect hemisphere. The coffering within this dome is not a simple grid. It consists of octagons, crosses, and hexagons that diminish in size as they rise toward the lantern, creating an illusion of infinite height through a meticulously planned geometric progression. The entire space feels alive, a direct result of mathematics being pushed to its expressive limits. Guarino Guarini took this mathematical ambition even further. In his Cappella della Sindone in Turin, the chapel built to house the shroud, he created a dome that seems to defy physical law. It is constructed from a series of intersecting stone arches that climb upward, weaving past one another to form a staggering star-shaped pattern against the sky. This was not mere decoration, it was a revolutionary feat of three-dimensional geometry. Guarini had to calculate the precise points where these complex arches would meet and support one another, creating a stone latticework of breathtaking lightness and complexity. He was working with architectural concepts that would not be formally described by mathematicians for another 200 years. To achieve these fluid forms, Baroque architects developed new mathematical techniques for calculating complex curves and surfaces. They thought in terms of transformation, of how a shape could evolve from one state to another, and they encoded this principle directly into their designs. This period also saw the sophisticated application of mathematical optics. Architects calculated the angles of windows and hidden light sources to choreograph dramatic plays of light and shadow throughout the day, using calculated illumination to heighten the emotional impact and alter the perception of space. The mathematics behind the Baroque was less about following strict classical rules and more about exploring new frontiers of form. These buildings encode not just perfect ratios, but the mathematical principles of dynamism itself. They represent a crucial expansion of how mathematics could inform design, proving that numbers and equations could be used to evoke wonder and passion as powerfully as they could evoke order and calm. In the undulating walls and soaring, intricate domes of the Baroque, we see a civilization using its highest mathematical understanding not to portray a perfect, static universe, but to capture the beautiful, thrilling, and dynamic chaos of the world in motion. Long before the pyramids or Stonehenge, our ancestors were already speaking the language of mathematics in stone. In the rolling green hills of Ireland, the great Neolithic tomb of Newgrange rises from the landscape, a massive earthen mound constructed over 5,000 years ago. Its most stunning feature is not its size, but a small, carefully engineered opening above the entrance known as the roof box. For just a few minutes at dawn on the winter solstice, a narrow beam of sunlight shoots through this precise slit, traveling down a long, dark passage to illuminate the inner burial chamber. This annual event is no accident of construction. It is a feat of astronomical alignment and geometric planning that required generations of observation and calculation. The builders had to understand the sun's slow journey across the sky, pinpoint its lowest point on the horizon, and then translate that celestial knowledge into a stone structure with unwavering accuracy. They were capturing a moment of cosmic time and freezing it in architecture. This same mathematical ambition is found at Micho in Scotland, another passage tomb where the setting sun of the winter solstice aligns perfectly with its entrance passage. The very shape of these tombs reveals a grasp of fundamental geometry. Their layouts often form perfect Pythagorean triangles, using whole number ratios to create stable, right-angled corners and symmetrical chambers. With only stone tools and human strength, these early architects surveyed the land, measured out complex shapes, and moved colossal stones into precise positions. The walls of these tombs are sometimes adorned with intricate spiral carvings and zigzag patterns. While their exact meaning is lost to time, these could be humanity's first mathematical notations, early attempts to diagram cosmological concepts or record-counting systems. They are the primordial scratchings of a mind beginning to quantify the world. These structures dismantle the idea of a primitive past. They mark the very beginning of the story we have been tracing, the moment humanity first decided to build its understanding of the universe into the land itself. The winter solstice light at Newgrange is more than a spectacle. It is a 5,000-year-old argument, a silent, persistent declaration that mathematical genius is not a modern invention, but a fundamental part of what makes us human. These mathematical languages of proportion created a silent dialogue across continents. A master builder in ancient Egypt might lay out a temple using the simple but powerful ratio of 1 to the square root of 2. This ratio, approximately 1 to 1.414, creates a rectangle with a special property. When you cut it in half, the two smaller rectangles retain that same elegant proportion. This was a practical and beautiful formula for scaling designs, and we find it etched into the very stones of their monuments. A world away, the architects of classical Greece were captivated by a different number, the golden ratio. This irrational number, approximately 1.618, appears in the Parthenon's facade, governing the relationship between its width and height with what they perceived as divine harmony. They believed this ratio was the very key to aesthetic perfection, a mathematical secret woven into the fabric of nature itself. Yet the fascinating truth is that these two different cultures, separated by sea and centuries, were exploring different points on the same mathematical spectrum. The golden ratio and the root 2 rectangle are close cousins in the family of harmonious proportions. This is not a coincidence. It suggests that the human eye and brain are naturally drawn to certain mathematical relationships, finding them inherently balanced and pleasing. We see this universal appeal echoed in the sacred geometry of Indian temples, where the entire layout is a mandala, a cosmic diagram built from interlocking squares and circles whose proportions are dictated by ancient texts. The same mathematical impulse appears in the modular systems of China, where a standard unit called the chi governed the proportions of every beam and bracket in a building, creating a unified harmony from the grandest hall to the smallest detail. Each culture developed its own unique dialect of this universal language. The Egyptians favored robust, stable ratios for their eternal stone structures. The Greeks sought a ratio that embodied dynamic beauty and philosophical ideals. The Indian system was deeply symbolic, connecting architectural form to spiritual cosmology. The Chinese approach was supremely practical, optimizing for efficient construction and structural integrity. But the story does not end with isolated discoveries. These systems of knowledge traveled through the Silk Road, through conquest, and through the shared notebooks of wandering craftsmen. Mathematical ideas flowed. Greek proportions influenced Roman builders, who then spread them across Europe. Indian temple geometry traveled to Southeast Asia, Chinese modular construction informed techniques in Japan and Korea. Where these traditions met, they created hybrid mathematical languages. A Byzantine church might blend Roman volumetric principles with Eastern symbolic ratios. A Mughal palace in India could fuse the Persian love for garden geometry with the Hindu science of mandala proportions. This cross-pollination enriched the global architectural vocabulary, proving that mathematics was the ultimate universal translator. The endurance of these systems is their greatest testament. A proportion that worked for an Egyptian priest building a tomb still felt right to a medieval monk designing a cloister, and still feels balanced to us today. This repeated, independent discovery of the same mathematical truths across the globe points to something fundamental. It shows that mathematics is not merely a human invention. It is a deep-seated human discovery, a slow and patient uncovering of the timeless rules that govern beauty, structure, and space. The diversity of architectural styles around the world can mask this underlying unity. But when you learn to see the proportions, you begin to hear the same quiet conversation happening in stone and wood everywhere. A conversation about the universal language of harmony that our ancestors everywhere were striving to speak. These recurring patterns in stone and glass form a distinct mathematical language. Sacred geometry provided the foundational alphabet for this language, a set of universal shapes that builders across the world used to encode both cosmic order and practical mathematics. The Vesica Piscis is one of the most primordial of these shapes, created simply by the overlap of two circles of the same size. Within its almond-shaped center lies a hidden mathematical truth, the precise ratio of the square root of 3. This irrational number, impossible to express as a simple fraction, appears naturally from the intersection of these perfect forms. It was not merely a symbol, it was a built-in calculation, a geometric constant that could be used to generate other proportions and harmonies throughout a building's design. This simple shape of two circles becomes the generative cell for more complex patterns. Repeating the process of intersecting circles creates the seed of life, and further repetition blooms into the flower of life, a mesmerizing pattern of 19 interlocking circles. Mathematically, this pattern is a masterclass in tessellation and perfect repetition, demonstrating how a single rule, applied consistently, can create immense complexity and beauty. The pattern contains within it the blueprint for Metatron's cube, a figure that itself holds all 5 Platonic solids, the only perfectly symmetrical 3-dimensional shapes. For the architect, these were not just decorative motifs to be carved on a wall. They were the underlying grid, the invisible scaffolding upon which the entire structure was conceived. The floor plan of a Gothic cathedral's rose window might be derived directly from the flower of life. The spacing of columns in an Egyptian temple hypostyle hall could be determined by the geometric relationships within Metatron's cube. This was mathematics operating as a symbolic framework, where every measurement and proportion was spiritually significant. A building designed this way was meant to be a microcosm, a small-scale model of a universe governed by mathematical law. The consistent recurrence of this same geometric language from the temples of Luxor to the floors of Chartres Cathedral to the tiles of the Alhambra points to something profound about human cognition. We are naturally drawn to these patterns because they reflect the fundamental structures we perceive in nature, from the arrangement of petals on a flower to the hexagonal cells of a honeycomb. Sacred geometry represents the most intimate fusion of the practical and the spiritual. It was a way for builders to use mathematics not just to ensure a wall would stand, but to ensure that the wall itself would speak, that it would tell a story about the harmony of the cosmos and humanity's place within it. This tradition turns every arch and every column into a philosophical statement, a permanent meditation on the idea that the universe itself is built from numbers, and that to build with those numbers is to participate in the very act of creation. A Gothic cathedral under construction was more than a building site. It was a living university of applied mathematics. High on the scaffolding, master masons did not work from detailed written plans. Instead, they transmitted complex geometric secrets through hands-on demonstration, using simple tools like the compass and straightedge to lay out full-scale templates on the tracing house floor. An apprentice learned not from a book, but by watching how his master solved the problem of turning a circle into a perfect arch or calculating the thrust of a flying buttress. This system of practical apprenticeship became the primary vessel for carrying mathematical knowledge across generations, a continuous chain of learning that stretched from one great project to the next. These master builders were the original international mathematicians wandering between kingdoms and continents. A mason who worked on a cathedral in France might later find employment on a castle in Germany or a church in England, carrying with him a mental toolkit of proportions, structural solutions, and geometric tricks. The great construction projects of the ancient and medieval worlds were melting pots of mathematical ideas. When a pharaoh commissioned a new temple or a caliph a new mosque, it drew the finest craftsmen from across the known world. Stonemasons from different traditions would work side by side, and in the process, they would inevitably exchange their unique approaches to solving geometric problems. This silent collaboration explains the mysterious appearance of similar mathematical principles in cultures separated by vast distances and time. Was it independent discovery, a shared human intuition for certain harmonious ratios, or was it the result of these undocumented journeys, the slow, patient migration of a master builder carrying a powerful idea from one civilization to another? The structures themselves often preserve knowledge that written records have lost. We know the Mesopotamians could solve quadratic equations because of their clay tablets, but we understand the full sophistication of their engineering mathematics only by studying the enduring proportions of their ziggurats. The written word could be lost to fire or decay, but a stone wall, once correctly calculated and erected, became a permanent statement of a civilization's mathematical capabilities. This is why so many traditions considered this knowledge sacred, even proprietary. Guilds of masons and priestly classes guarded their geometric secrets closely, not out of mere secrecy, but from a profound understanding that this was the most valuable knowledge their society possessed. The architecture they created became the public library for this protected wisdom. The Parthenon's proportions were there for any educated Greek to study, just as the fractal complexity of an Indian temple spire was visible to every pilgrim. But to truly read these stone books, to understand the deeper mathematical language, required initiation. This system of transmission proved astonishingly resilient. It survived the collapse of the Roman Empire as the mathematical knowledge of classical antiquity found refuge in the stonework of early Christian churches. It weathered religious transformations with the geometric principles of one faith's architecture quietly informing the next. The same underlying mathematics that shaped a Byzantine church could be detected in an Ottoman mosque, adapted to a new theology but unchanged in its core logic. This endurance reveals something fundamental about mathematics itself. When treated as a living practice, embodied in the act of creation rather than confined to abstract theory, it becomes almost impossible to erase. A library can be burned, but how do you destroy a mathematical principle that is woven into the very fabric of a city, that is repeated in 1,000 temples, cathedrals, and palaces across the globe? The stone memory proved more durable than parchment. and the master builder's compass traced a more continuous line through history than any single text. This was humanity's first and most robust cloud storage, a distributed network of mathematical knowledge written in a language of proportion, structure, and space that anyone in any age could learn to read by simply learning to build. Our modern tools are now reading the fine print in these stone blueprints. Laser scanners and high-resolution photogrammetry capture ancient structures with sub-millimeter accuracy, revealing a hidden layer of mathematical intent invisible to the naked eye. We are no longer just measuring walls, we are digitizing the very thoughts of the architects. At the Parthenon, for centuries celebrated for its perfect straight lines, digital analysis uncovered a breathtaking secret. The entire structure is a masterpiece of deliberate curvature. Its base platform arcs upward slightly, and its columns lean inward at precise angles. These are not construction errors, they are complex optical refinements, a series of calculated curves designed to counter the way the human eye perceives massive objects at a distance. The builders used advanced geometry to make the temple appear perfectly straight and majestic, encoding a sophisticated understanding of human perception directly into the marble. This is mathematics serving aesthetics at a level we scarcely imagined. Across the ocean, LiDAR technology has stripped away the dense Guatemalan jungle to expose the true genius of Mayan urban planning. What appeared to be scattered temples are now revealed as components of vast geometric cityscapes. The ancient Maya laid out their entire cities, from grand plazas to residential compounds, according to intricate geometric patterns and cosmic diagrams. Their urban centers were not just built, they were computed, with alignments that mirror constellations and sacred ratios governing the distance between structures. This digital cartography confirms they were not merely stargazers but master geometers who scaled their celestial models to an urban scale. Even the Gothic cathedrals, long admired for their soaring beauty, are yielding new secrets. Computational models analyzing the stress and thrust of their stone skeletons have decoded the master mason's methods. We can now see the precise geometric sequences they used to generate the complex curves of a rib vault or calculate the perfect angle for a flying buttress. This digital reverse engineering proves that their structural genius was rooted in a profound, albeit practical, grasp of mathematical physics. The most exciting revelation is how often this new data confirms the theories of earlier researchers who worked with simple tapes and theodolites. Their intuitions about standardized measurements and encoded astronomy are now being validated with overwhelming digital evidence. But the technology is also revealing entirely new layers of sophistication, showing that our ancestors' mathematical capabilities rivaled those of early modern Europe. This forces a dramatic rewrite of the traditional historical narrative, which often placed Europe at the pinnacle of mathematical progress. We are now seeing a global tapestry of innovation, with multiple centers of advanced mathematical thought flourishing independently. The modern decoding of these ancient codes creates a beautiful symmetry. We are using our most advanced mathematics, from computational algorithms to three-dimensional modeling, to finally comprehend theirs. This is not the end of the story, but a thrilling new beginning where the silent questions posed in stone are finally being answered with the precise language of light and data. This journey through stone and number reveals a human story far grander than any textbook. We have walked through Neolithic stone circles laid out with a universal yardstick, marveled at pyramids encoding pi and the golden ratio, and traced the fractal patterns of Indian spires. We have seen Gothic cathedrals defy gravity with geometric skeletons and watched Mayan temples catch the equinox sun with clockwork precision. across continents and millennia, from the Ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the gardens of Persia, one truth stands immutable. Our ancestors were not primitive. They were profound mathematicians, and their most enduring buildings were their libraries. These were not simple shelters. They were sophisticated textbooks written in the only language guaranteed to survive fire, flood, and the forgetting of generations, the universal language of mathematics. What emerges is a radical new map of our intellectual heritage. The story of mathematics is not a straight, narrow path leading from a dark past to our enlightened present. It is a rich global tapestry, a chorus of different voices all singing the same universal truths about geometry, astronomy, and harmonious proportion. The same mathematical themes recur not because of stolen ideas, but because of a shared human cognition, a common intuition for the patterns that underpin our world. The Pythagorean triangle appears in Scotland and Babylon. The golden ratio echoes in Greece and Egypt. Fractals bloom in India and Cambodia. This is not coincidence. It is the signature of a universal human mind at work. These silent stone archives force a humbling reconsideration of ancient capability. The builders of these wonders were our intellectual equals, thinkers who developed a practical and philosophical mastery of mathematics that rivals our own in its elegance and ambition. They simply chose a different medium for their work, trading fleeting paper for eternal stone. Their legacy challenges the very core of how we measure progress. The blueprints etched into ancient walls teach us that mathematics is far more than abstract symbols on a page. It is the practical wisdom of the universe, a tool for creating lasting beauty, for tracking cosmic time, and for building a world in harmony with the heavens. As our laser scanners and satellites finally decode these ancient messages, we are recovering more than lost formulas. We are reclaiming lost chapters of the human spirit, perspectives on a cosmos built from number and pattern. These stones have been patiently whispering their lessons for thousands of years. They hold the keys to understanding our own place in a mathematical universe, reminding us that the deepest truths are often those written not on paper, but carved in stone, waiting for us to learn how to see.